They looked at her hoodie and saw a threat. They looked at her skin and saw someone who didn't belong. But what they didn't see was the badge hidden in her inner pocket, or the federal warrant she was about to execute. When Senior Gate Agent Brianna Miller blocked Dr. Vivian Clark from boarding first class, she thought she was just protecting the brand. She didn't realize she was handing a loaded gun to the ruthless federal auditor sent to take that brand apart, piece by piece. You are not going to believe how hard the karma hits in this one. This is the story of the Auditor. The fluorescent lights of Chicago O'Hare's Terminal 3 hummed with that specific, headache-inducing frequency that only weary travelers seem to hear. It was 6:45 a.m., a time when patience is thin and coffee is the only currency that matters. Dr. Vivian Clark adjusted the strap of her leather duffel bag. She wasn't dressed in her usual power suit. Today, she wore a charcoal grey cashmere hoodie, matching joggers, and pristine white sneakers. To the untrained eye, she looked like a tired college student or perhaps a hip-hop artist's assistant. To the trained eye, the hoodie was Loro Piana, the bag was vintage Hermes, and the watch on her wrist cost more than a mid-sized sedan. But Brianna Miller, the senior gate agent for Skyline Airways, didn't have a trained eye. She had a bitter eye. Brianna stood behind the podium at Gate K-12 like a sentinel guarding the gates of heaven. She had worked for Skyline for 22 years. Her uniform was perfectly pressed, her blonde hair was sprayed into an immovable helmet, and her name tag gleamed under the lights. She prided herself on being the first line of defense against what she privately called riffraff. Vivian approached the priority lane. Her digital boarding pass was already pulled up on her phone. Seat 1A, first class. She stepped up to the scanner, offering a polite, tired smile. "Good morning." Brianna didn't look up. She held up a hand, her long, manicured nails flashing like a stop sign. "Economy boarding is in Zone 4, honey. That's going to be another 20 minutes. Please step back to the general waiting area." Vivian paused. She was used to this. In her line of work, auditing major corporations for federal compliance and anti-discrimination practices, she saw the ugly underbelly of corporate culture daily. But usually, she was observing from a distance. Today, she was the subject. "I'm in first class," Vivian said, her voice calm, possessing that specific timbre of someone who holds 3 PhDs and manages a budget of $4 billion. She held out her phone. Brianna finally looked up. Her eyes scanned Vivian from the hood to the sneakers, lingering on the comfortable joggers with a look of undisguised distaste. She let out a short, sharp laugh, a sound like glass breaking. "This lane is for our premium customers," Brianna said, her voice raising just enough for the line of businessmen behind Vivian to hear. "Upgrades don't transfer to the priority lane unless you purchase the full fare, which—" She trailed off, implying the impossibility of the scenario. "Just step aside. I have Diamond Medallion members waiting." "I am a Diamond Medallion member," Vivian said, her pulse remaining steady. "And I purchased the full fare. Scan the code, Brianna." Brianna bristled at the use of her first name. She snatched the phone from Vivian's hand, her movements aggressive. She held it under the scanner, almost hoping for the red light of rejection. Beep. Green light. The screen on Brianna's monitor flashed. Clark, Vivian. 1A. Status: VIP do not move. Most employees would have apologized. They would have seen the VIP tag and pivoted immediately. But Brianna Miller was not most employees. She was a woman who had been passed over for a station manager promotion 3 times in 5 years. She felt the world owed her respect, and she hated giving it to people she deemed unworthy. She looked at the screen, then back at Vivian. Her lips thinned. "There must be a system glitch," Brianna announced loudly. She began typing furiously on her keyboard. "Excuse me?" Vivian asked, stepping closer. "The system is flagging this ticket as fraudulent," Brianna lied. It was a smooth lie, one she had used before to bump people she didn't like, so she could give the seat to non-revenue staff or friends. "It happens with third-party vendors. You probably bought this off some discount site, didn't you? It's a duplicate fare." "I bought it directly from the Skyline corporate portal," Vivian said, her eyes narrowing. "Recheck it." "I don't need to recheck anything," Brianna snapped. "I'm the senior agent. I know a glitch when I see one. You're blocking the boarding path. I'm going to have to ask you to step aside while I clear the queue. If there's an open seat in economy after everyone boards, I'll see what I can do." "I'm not sitting in economy," Vivian said, her voice dropping an octave, becoming dangerously low. "I am sitting in 1A. And if you deny me boarding, you are violating Federal Aviation Regulation 418 CFR Part 250, alongside Title 6 of the Civil Rights Act." Brianna froze. The specific legal jargon hung in the air. A man in a suit behind Vivian, a tall guy with salt and pepper hair, leaned forward. "Is there a problem here?" the man asked. "Let her board, Brianna." The light turned green. Brianna's face flushed a blotchy red. She turned her glare on the man. "Sir, please do not interfere with security protocols. This passenger is being flagged for potential fraud." She turned back to Vivian, her eyes full of malice. "Security protocols," she repeated, savoring the power of the words. "In fact, since you want to quote federal law, let's do this by the book. I'm marking you as a disruptive passenger. You're denied boarding completely." The air left the immediate vicinity. "You're making a mistake," Vivian said softly. It wasn't a threat, it was a statement of fact. A very expensive mistake. "Security!" Brianna shouted, waving over two TSA agents who were chatting nearby. "I have a disruptive passenger refusing to leave the gate area." Vivian looked at Brianna. She memorized the ID number on Brianna's badge. She memorized the time, 6:52 a.m. She memorized the sneer on Brianna's face. "Okay," Vivian said. She took her phone back. "I'll step aside." Brianna smirked, a victorious curl of the lip. "That's what I thought. Go stand by the wall. Maybe you can catch the Greyhound." Vivian walked over to the floor-to-ceiling windows. She didn't call customer service. She didn't call her lawyer. She opened a secure app on her phone, marked DOJ Int Audit. She typed in a single message. "Initiate Protocol 7, Skyline Airways. Location, ORD. Target, Operations." Then she dialed a number. "Director Harrison," she said, when the voice answered. "It's Clark. I'm at O'Hare. Activate the override. I need to be on this plane, and I need you to flag the flight crew. Let them know I'm coming, but don't tell them who I am. Just tell them I'm a corporate observer. I want to see how deep the rot goes." 5 minutes later, the phone at the gate podium rang. Brianna snatched it up, annoyed. "Gate K12, Miller speaking." She listened for a moment, her face paling slightly. It was the station manager, a man named Gary, who usually spent his mornings hiding in his office. "Put her on, Brianna." Gary's voice was tight. "Override the hold. Corporate just pinged us. They said if that passenger isn't in 1A by the time doors close, the entire Chicago hub loses its quarterly bonus." "But," Brianna stammered, looking over at Vivian, who was calmly typing on her phone by the window. "She was disruptive. She threatened me with legal—" "I don't care if she threatened to burn the terminal down, Brianna," Gary screamed. "Board her. Now. And fix your face." Brianna slammed the phone down. She felt sick. She felt humiliated. And like all bullies who are backed into a corner, she didn't learn a lesson. She just got angrier. She decided that if she had to let this woman on the plane, she was going to make the flight A living hell. She marched over to Vivian. There was an override. Brianna spat the words out like poison. You can board, but I'm putting a note in your file. One wrong move on this plane, and the crew will have you arrested upon landing. Vivian didn't look up from her phone as she walked past Brianna. Documentation is key, Brianna. Make sure you spell my name right. Vivian walked down the jet bridge. Her heart was beating fast, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of the hunt. She was the lead auditor for the Federal Transportation Oversight Committee. She had been investigating Skyline Airways for 6 months regarding allegations of systemic bias and safety corner cutting. She had planned to do this audit anonymously from a distance, but Brianna Miller had just given her a front row seat. She stepped onto the plane. The Airbus A321 was sleek, but the atmosphere was tense. The lead flight attendant stood at the door. Her name tag read Tiffany. She was younger than Brianna, perhaps in her early 30s, with too much bronzer and a bored expression. Brianna had evidently radioed ahead. Tiffany looked at Vivian's boarding pass, then at Vivian's hoodie, and gave a heavy, theatrical sigh. 1A, Tiffany said, pointing vaguely to the left. Overhead bins are full. You'll have to check that bag. Vivian looked at the overhead bin above 1A. It was wide open and completely empty. The bin is empty, Vivian said, gesturing to it. That's reserved for crew equipment, Tiffany lied. She blocked the aisle. I said, check the bag, or get off. Vivian looked Tiffany in the eye. The crew equipment excuse was a classic violation of passenger rights when space was available. I have lithium batteries and sensitive documents in here, Vivian said. Federal regulations prohibit checking them. Tiffany rolled her eyes. Fine, but if it doesn't fit, it's coming out. Vivian lifted the bag and slid it perfectly into the bin. It fit with room to spare. She sat down in the wide leather seat of 1A. She took out a small black notebook and a gold pen. 0710 a.m., flight attendant Tiffany. Denied overhead usage. Fabricated crew equipment restriction. Hostile demeanor. As the rest of the passengers boarded, the tension in the cabin was palpable. The man from the gate, the one with salt and pepper hair, sat down in 1B, right next to her. He leaned over. I saw what happened back there. Unbelievable, I'm Robert. Robert Sterling. Vivian shook his hand. Vivian, and thank you for speaking up. You have a lot of patience, Robert whispered. I would have lost it. Patience pays, Vivian said enigmatically. Just then, Tiffany came down the aisle with a tray of pre-departure drinks, champagne and orange juice. She served Robert with a bright, flirtatious smile. Champagne for you, Mr. Sterling. We're so happy to have you flying Skyline. Thank you, Robert said. Tiffany turned to Vivian. The smile vanished instantly. She held the tray away, as if Vivian might contaminate the glasses. I need to see your ID again, Tiffany said loudly. The cabin went quiet. People in rows 2 and 3 craned their necks. I already showed it at the gate, Vivian said. Yeah, well, Brianna said there were discrepancies. I need to make sure you actually belong in this seat before I serve you premium beverages. Policy. Robert frowned. She didn't ask for my ID. You look like you belong here, sir, Tiffany said, her voice dripping with sweet, unconscious bias. She turned back to Vivian. ID, now. Vivian reached into her bag, but she didn't pull out her driver's license. She pulled out her sleek government-issue datapad. She placed it on the tray table. I'm not drinking, Tiffany, Vivian said, but I will take a water, room temperature. And I'd like to know why the first-class manifest hasn't been updated on your tablet. You should have my dietary restrictions listed. Tiffany scoffed. Water is for paying customers. I'll bring you a cup from the tap when we're in the air. She spun around and marched back to the galley. Robert looked horrified. That is... "I've never seen anything like that. You should report her." Vivian opened her notebook again. She wrote, "Ward 7:20 a.m. Discriminatory service refusal. Public humiliation attempt. Violation of Skyline service standards. Sec 4.2. She turned to Robert and offered a small, terrifying smile. "Oh, I'm going to do more than report her, Robert," she whispered. "By the time this plane lands in D.C., Tiffany and Brianna are going to wish they had never learned to speak." The plane pushed back from the gate. The safety demonstration began. But Vivian wasn't watching the exits. She was watching Tiffany, who was currently in the galley, whispering aggressively to another flight attendant while pointing at the back of Vivian's head. The audit had officially begun, and they had no idea who was watching. The aircraft reached cruising altitude, 35,000 feet above the Midwest. Outside, the sky was a brilliant, uninterrupted blue. Inside the first-class cabin, however, the atmosphere was stormier than a hurricane. Vivian sat silently, reviewing a PDF on her phone. Skyline Airways quarterly sensitivity training logs. According to the document, Tiffany, employee ID 8842, had skipped the last 3 mandatory sessions. Vivian made a small note in her black book. The smell of heated rosemary and garlic wafted through the cabin. Lunch service. Tiffany pushed the cart down the aisle. She was all smiles for Robert in 1B. "Mr. Sterling," she cooed, placing a white linen napkin on his tray table. "We have the herb-crusted filet mignon for you, cooked medium rare just as you like. Or the sea bass." "The filet sounds wonderful, thank you," Robert said. He glanced uneasily at Vivian. Tiffany turned to Vivian. The smile dropped like a stone. She didn't offer a napkin. She didn't open the tray table. "Chicken or pasta?" she asked, looking at the ceiling. "I pre-ordered the vegan option through the Diamond Medallion portal," Vivian said calmly. "The roasted vegetable terrine." Tiffany let out a sharp, mocking laugh. "We don't have that. Catering didn't load it. You probably didn't save the preference correctly. It happens when people don't know how to use the app." "I have the confirmation code right here," Vivian said, tapping her screen. "Look," Tiffany snapped, leaning in, invading Vivian's personal space. "I don't care what your phone says. I have 3 chicken and 2 pasta left. If you don't want them, you can starve. Or I can bring you a cheese box from economy. But I'll have to charge you $12. Robert slammed his hand down on his armrest. "This is absurd. She's a first-class passenger. You can't charge her for a snack box if you lost her meal." "Sir, please don't let her agitate you," Tiffany said, her voice dripping with fake concern. "She's been difficult since she stepped on the plane. It's a strategy, you know. They complain to get free miles." Vivian's eyes went cold. The word hung in the air, heavy and ugly. "I'll take the water," Vivian said, her voice ice. "Just the water." Tiffany smirked. She grabbed a plastic cup, not the crystal glass the other passengers had, filled it from a large bottle of generic water, and slammed it onto Vivian's closed tray table. Water sloshed over the rim, dripping onto Vivian's cashmere joggers. "Oops," Tiffany said, turning away without offering a napkin. "Turbulence." Vivian didn't flinch. She took a tissue from her own pocket and dabbed the water. Then she noticed something. As Tiffany turned to serve the passengers in row 2, she left the meal cart unlocked in the aisle. The brakes weren't engaged. The floor of the A321 had a slight incline during cruise. The heavy steel cart began to roll backward, slowly at first, then gaining speed toward the economy curtain. "The cart!" Robert shouted. Tiffany was too busy gossiping with a passenger in 2C to notice. Vivian unbuckled her seatbelt. In one fluid motion, she lunged into the aisle, grabbing the handle of the heavy cart just inches before it would have smashed into the knees of an elderly woman in row 3. She hauled it back, engaging the red brake pedal with her foot. Click. The cabin fell silent. Tiffany spun around. She saw Vivian standing in the aisle, hand on the cart. Instead of thanking her, Tiffany's eyes went wide with opportunistic glee. She saw her chance. "Get your hands off my equipment!" Tiffany shrieked. "Sit down! You are interfering with flight crew duties." "You left the brake off," Vivian said, her voice projecting clearly to the back of the cabin. It was rolling toward the passengers. "Liar!" Tiffany yelled. "I saw you. You were trying to steal liquor from the drawer. I saw you unlatch it." She marched over to the wall phone near the cockpit door. She picked up the receiver and keyed the code for the flight deck. "Captain," Tiffany said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "We have a code 3 in the cabin. The passenger in 1A is out of her seat, aggressive, and just attempted to access the liquor cart. I don't feel safe. I need you to radio police for a gate intercept in D.C. Robert stood up. "That is a lie. She just saved that woman from getting hit by the cart." "Sir, sit down or you'll be cited for non-compliance too," Tiffany barked. She looked at Vivian with a triumphant sneer. "You're done. When we land, you're going to jail. Federal interference with a flight crew is a felony, sweetheart." Vivian sat back down. She smoothed her hoodie. She looked at Tiffany with a look of profound pity. "You're right, Tiffany," Vivian said softly. "Federal interference is a felony, and falsifying a report to the captain? That's the end of a career." Vivian picked up her phone. She sent one more text to Harrison. "Now." 5 minutes later, the plane was heavy with tension. The passengers in first class were whispering. The elderly woman in row 3 was telling her neighbor, "She stopped the cart. That stewardess is crazy." In the cockpit, Captain Mark Reynolds was confused. He had just received a report from his lead flight attendant, Tiffany, claiming the woman in 1A was a violent threat. But seconds later, the A-CARS printer in the center console began to chatter, a message printed out on the thermal paper. From Department of Transportation, FAA Oversight. Priority. Urgent. Level 1 to Captain Flight Sky 492. Subject. Onboard asset. Captain Reynolds. You have a federal auditor on board. Dr. Vivian Clark. Seat 1A. She is conducting a live compliance check. Do not repeat. Do not engage law enforcement against her. Her authority supersedes cabin crew. She has flagged a critical personnel issue. Grant her access to the cockpit intercom if requested. Acknowledge." Captain Reynolds stared at the paper. The blood drained from his face. "Oh, God," he muttered to his co-pilot, a young man named Dave. "What is it?" Dave asked. "Tiffany," Reynolds groaned. "She just tried to frame a federal auditor." Reynolds knew Tiffany. He knew she was difficult, but the union made it hard to fire her without concrete proof. He also knew that if a federal auditor was on board and his crew was mistreating her, the entire airline could be grounded pending investigation. "I have to go back there," Reynolds said. He unbuckled. "You have the comms." Back in the cabin, Tiffany was currently standing over Vivian, holding a plastic flex cuff, a zip tie used for unruly passengers. "The captain gave me authority," Tiffany lied, brandishing the plastic cuffs. "Since you won't stop eyeing the cart, I'm going to have to restrain your hands." "You touch me with those?" Vivian said, her voice low and deadly. "And you will be in a federal prison by dinner time." "Resisting!" Tiffany shouted for the benefit of the cabin. "She's resisting!" Suddenly the cockpit door hissed open. Captain Reynolds stepped out. He was a tall man with 4 stripes on his shoulders. He looked panicked. Tiffany's face lit up. "Captain, perfect timing. She's threatening me. I was just about to restrain her." Reynolds ignored Tiffany completely. He looked straight at seat 1A. He saw the woman in the hoodie. He saw the calm, steely gaze. He saw the phone in her hand, with the government crest on the screen. He walked past Tiffany as if she didn't exist. He stopped in front of Vivian. "Dr. Clark?" the captain asked, his voice respectful and shaking slightly. Vivian looked up. "Captain Reynolds, nice to finally meet you. I believe we have a situation." Tiffany froze. Her mouth fell open. "Captain, why are you talking to her? She's the threat." "Quiet, Tiffany," Reynolds snapped. He turned back to Vivian. "Ma'am, I just received a communique from the DOT. I apologize for whatever has been happening back here. Is there anything you need?" Vivian stood up. She didn't look like a passenger anymore. She looked like a boss. "Yes, Captain. First, I need you to relieve this flight attendant of duty immediately. She is a safety liability. She failed to secure the braking mechanism on the meal cart, nearly injuring a passenger, and then filed a false report to the flight deck." "I did not!" Tiffany screeched. "She's lying! Who is she?" Vivian reached into the inner pocket of her hoodie. She pulled out a leather wallet and flipped it open. The gold badge of the Federal Transportation Oversight Committee caught the sunlight streaming through the window. Below it was an ID card with the level clearance, red. "I am the person who decides if Skyline Airways gets to keep its operating license," Vivian said to Tiffany. "And right now, it's not looking good." The color drained from Tiffany's face so fast she looked like a corpse. The flex cuffs dropped from her hand onto the floor. I didn't know," Tiffany stammered. "I thought you were just a black woman in a hoodie?" Vivian finished the sentence for her. "I know exactly what you thought, and that is exactly why I'm here." Vivian turned to the captain. "Captain, I want her in the jump seat, silent, for the remainder of the flight. No service duties. She is suspended pending the investigation on the ground. Send the backup attendant from economy up here to handle first class." "Yes, ma'am," Captain Reynolds said instantly. He turned to Tiffany, his eyes furious. "You heard her. Jump seat. Now, give me your apron." Tiffany looked around the cabin. Every passenger was staring at her. Robert Sterling was grinning ear to ear. The elderly lady in row 3 gave a little wave. Trembling, Tiffany pulled off her service apron and handed it to the captain. She walked the walk of shame to the forward jump seat near the door, buckled herself in, and stared at her knees. Vivian sat back down. "Thank you, Captain," she said. "Oh, and Captain?" "Yes, Dr. Clark. I believe Mr. Sterling here ordered the filet mignon. Please ensure the new attendant finds one for him." "Consider it done." The captain returned to the cockpit. The economy curtain parted, and a confused but polite young flight attendant named Sarah appeared. I was told to take over," Sarah asked. "Yes," Vivian smiled, opening her notebook again. "We're going to have a great flight, Sarah. Just watch the brakes on the cart." Robert leaned over to Vivian. He looked at her with total awe. "That," Robert whispered, "was the greatest thing I have ever witnessed in my life. Who are you, really?" Vivian winked. "Just an auditor, Robert. Just doing my paperwork." But the drama wasn't over. They still had to land, and waiting on the ground in Washington, D.C. wasn't just the police. It was Brianna Miller's worst nightmare. Because while Tiffany was trapped in the air, Brianna had been busy on the ground, digging her own grave deeper. While Flight 492 was cruising at 35,000 feet, a different kind of turbulence was hitting the ground at Chicago O'Hare. Brianna Miller was feeling good. In fact, she felt powerful. After the flight had departed, she had spent the last hour holding court at the service counter, recounting her heroic stand against the unruly passenger to a younger gate agent named Jessica. "She thought she could just waltz into first class with a hoodie," Brianna said, sipping her lukewarm coffee. I told her, "Honey, not on my watch. I don't care what the computer says. I know a scammer when I see one. I put a code on her return ticket too. She's going to be flagged at every airport in the country." Jessica looked uneasy. But Gary said there was an override. Corporate called. "Corporate is soft." Brianna waved a hand dismissively. "They don't see what we see on the front lines. I did the airline a favor. I'm going to file a full incident report right now. By the time she lands in D.C., she'll be lucky if she isn't banned for life." Brianna logged into the Skyline Airways internal personnel system. She cracked her knuckles, ready to type out a masterpiece of fiction. She navigated to the Passenger Incident Reporting System, PIRS. She entered the flight number, Sky 492. She entered the seat number, 1A. She entered the passenger name, Clark Vivian. She began to type. Passenger was belligerent, smelled of alcohol, and refused to follow crew instructions regarding boarding procedures. Suspected fraud regarding ticket purchase. Defensive and hostile when questioned. She moved the mouse to click Submit Permanent Record. But as her finger hovered over the button, her screen flickered. The standard blue Skyline interface suddenly flashed a harsh, warning red. A message popped up in bold black letters that Brianna had never seen in her 22 years of service. Critical System Override User, B. Miller, Access Revoked Code, Federal Lockout, DOJ OIG Terminal Disabled. What on earth? Brianna frowned, hitting the escape key. Nothing happened. She hit Enter. Nothing. The screen was frozen. "Jessica, is your computer working?" Brianna asked, annoyed. "Mine just froze." Jessica didn't answer. She was staring past Brianna, her eyes wide with fear. Brianna spun around. Standing there were 3 people. One was Gary, the station manager, and he looked like he was about to vomit. His tie was crooked, and he was sweating profusely. Flanking him were 2 men in dark suits. They weren't Skyline management. They weren't airport police. They wore lanyards with the seal of the United States Department of Transportation, Office of the Inspector General. "Brianna Miller?" one of the suits asked. He didn't sound like he was asking a question. "Yes?" Brianna stood up, her indignation rising. "Who are you? I'm in the middle of filing a safety report." "You are in the middle of falsifying a federal record," the man said. He stepped around the counter, invading her sanctuary. "I'm Agent Perkins. This is Agent Lewis. You need to step away from the computer immediately." "Excuse me?" Brianna laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. "I am the senior gate agent here. You can't just—" "Brianna, shut up!" Gary screamed. His voice cracked. "Just shut up and do what they say." Brianna froze. She had never heard Gary raise his voice. "Ms. Miller," Agent Perkins continued, his voice calm and terrifying. 10 minutes ago, we received a digital flag from an auditor on Flight 492. She transmitted evidence that you attempted to deny boarding to a federal officer in the performance of her duties, and that you are currently attempting to retaliate by manipulating her passenger profile. I was just—" Brianna stammered. "She was rude. She wore a hoodie." "That rude woman is Dr. Vivian Clark," Agent Lewis said, stepping in close. "She is the lead auditor for the Civil Rights Compliance Division. She is currently conducting a Level 1 audit of Skyline Airways, and you just gave her the ammunition to shut this entire hub down." Brianna felt her knees turn to water. She grabbed the counter for support. "I didn't know." "Ignorance of the law is not a defense, Ms. Miller," Perkins said. He pulled a pair of handcuffs from his belt. "You are being detained for interference with a federal investigation and potential wire fraud regarding the manipulation of passenger manifests." "Handcuffs?" Brianna shrieked. "Here, in the terminal, everyone can see. Maybe you should have thought about that before you tried to publicly humiliate a passenger," Perkins said. He spun her around. Click! Click! The sound of the cuffs echoed in the quiet gate area. Dozens of passengers waiting for the next flight to Miami were watching. Many had their phones out, recording. "Gary!" Brianna pleaded, as she was marched out from behind the podium. "Gary, help me! I've given 20 years to this company." Gary shook his head, looking at the floor. "You're on your own, Brianna. Corporate just called. You're terminated, effective immediately. They're trying to save the stock price." As Brianna was led away, weeping through the terminal she had ruled like a tyrant for 2 decades, she saw the faces of the people she passed. They weren't looking at her with respect. They were looking at her with the same judgment she had dished out so freely. But the nightmare was only beginning. The plane hadn't even landed yet. Flight 492 began its descent into Reagan National Airport, DCA. The Potomac River glittered below, winding past the monuments of the Capitol. Inside the cabin, the mood was surreal. Tiffany was still strapped into the jump seat, staring at the floor, tears streaming down her face, ruining her bronzer. Sarah, the young flight attendant from economy, had seamlessly taken over first-class service, proving that kindness was actually quite easy. Captain Reynolds came over the intercom. His voice was serious. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are beginning our final approach into Washington, D.C. We ask that you remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. Upon arrival at the gate, I must ask that all passengers remain seated to allow local authorities to board the aircraft. Thank you for your cooperation." A ripple of nervous whispers went through the cabin. "Authorities?" someone whispered. "Is it a bomb threat?" Robert Sterling leaned over to Vivian. "That's for Tiffany, isn't it?" Vivian closed her black notebook. She had filled 10 pages. "Actions have consequences, Robert. Today the bill comes due." The wheels touched down with a smooth thud. The plane taxied quickly, bypassing the usual waiting area and heading to a gate at the very end of Terminal B. Through the window, Robert saw it first. "Wow," he said. "Look at the tarmac." Vivienne looked out. There were 3 police cruisers, lights flashing silently. Standing next to them was a black SUV with tinted windows and government plates, and standing next to the jet bridge stairs was a group of men in expensive suits, looking terrified. The plane came to a halt. The seatbelt sign dinged off. "Please remain seated," the captain's voice commanded again. The cabin door opened. 2 officers from the Metropolitan Washington Airport's Authority Police stepped onto the plane. They were followed by a man in a trench coat, Vivian's boss, Director Harrison. Tiffany, seeing the police, suddenly found her voice. She unbuckled her jump seat belt and scrambled up. "Officers! Officers!" she screamed, pointing a shaking finger at Vivian in seat 1A. "Thank God you're here! That woman! She's crazy! She hijacked the service! She impersonated a federal agent! Arrest her!" The cabin went deadly silent. Tiffany's accusation hung in the air, desperate and delusional. The lead police officer looked at Tiffany. He looked at her messy uniform, her wild eyes. Then he looked at Vivian, who was sitting calmly with her hands folded on her lap. Director Harrison stepped past the police. He walked straight to Vivian. "Dr. Clark," Harrison said, nodding respectfully. "Status?" "Audit complete, Director," Vivian said, standing up. "I have documented 7 counts of civil rights violations, 3 safety protocol breaches, and 1 instance of filing a false police report by crew member Tiffany Banks." Tiffany's jaw dropped. "What? No, you're actually—" Vivian looked at the police officers and gestured to Tiffany. "Officers, that is Miss Banks. She is to be charged with interfering with a federal flight crew member under 49 U.S. Code, Paragraph 46504, and making false statements to law enforcement." "Miss Banks," the officer said, grabbing Tiffany's arm firmly. hands behind your back. "No, you can't. I was just following Brianna's instructions," Tiffany wailed as the cuffs were snapped onto her wrists. "You can discuss that with the FBI," the officer said. They dragged Tiffany off the plane. As she passed row 1, she looked at Vivian one last time. There was no arrogance left, only pure, unadulterated fear. Vivian didn't even blink. "Shall we?" Harrison asked, gesturing to the door. "After you," Vivian said. She turned to Robert Sterling one last time. "It was a pleasure meeting you, Robert. Enjoy your stay in D.C. "You are my hero," Robert said, clapping. The rest of the first-class cabin joined in. A round of applause broke out as Vivian grabbed her duffel bag, the same bag they tried to force her to check, and walked off the plane. But the real show was waiting in the jet bridge. Standing there was Arthur Pendleton, the executive vice president of operations for Skyline Airways. He had flown down from New York on a private jet the moment the alert went out. He looked like a man who was watching his career burn to the ground. "Dr. Clark," Pendleton said, rushing forward, his hand extended. He was trembling. "Dr. Clark, I am Arthur Pendleton. On behalf of Skyline, I want to offer my deepest, most sincere apologies. What happened today is not reflective of our values." Vivian stopped. She didn't shake his hand. She looked him up and down, adjusting her Loro Piana hoodie. "Mr. Pendleton," she said coolly, "based on what I observed today, from your senior gate agent to your lead flight attendant, this is exactly reflective of your values. It's systemic, it's cultural, and it's rot. We will make changes," Pendleton pleaded. "We will fire everyone involved. We will offer you a settlement. Anything." Vivian pulled a thick envelope from her bag. She slapped it into Pendleton's chest. He fumbled to catch it. "That is a notice of intent to suspend," Vivian said. "You have 48 hours to present a remediation plan to my office. If you don't, I ground your entire fleet. Every single plane, domestic and international." Pendleton paled. "Ground the fleet? That would bankrupt us in a week." "Then I suggest you get to work," Vivian said. "And Mr. Pendleton?" "Yes?" "Next time someone walks up to your priority lane in a hoodie," Vivian smiled, a sharp, dangerous smile, "you might want to check if they're the one holding the keys to your kingdom before you treat them like trash." She walked past him, Director Harrison at her side, leaving the executive standing in the cold jet bridge, holding the paperwork that could destroy his company. Vivian walked through the terminal, her sneakers squeaking softly on the polished floor. She didn't look back. She had a report to file, and justice was a dish best served at cruising altitude. The descent of Flight 492 into Reagan National Airport marked the end of a journey, but the beginning of a reckoning. As Vivian Clark walked up the jet bridge, the air felt different, charged with the static electricity of impending doom for Skyline Airways. Arthur Pendleton, the executive vice president of operations, was not merely waiting, he was unraveling. A man accustomed to $5,000 suits and the deference of subordinates, he now looked like a schoolboy called to the principal's office. He stood flanked by 2 corporate lawyers who checked their watches nervously, knowing that every minute Dr. Clark remained unsatisfied was costing the airline approximately $40,000 in plummeting stock value. "Dr. Clark," Pendleton began, his voice cracking slightly. He extended a hand that was noticeably damp. "I want to personally assure you," Vivian didn't break stride. She ignored his hand, walking past him as Director Harrison flanked her like a bodyguard. "Save the assurances for the press release, Arthur. You're going to need them." She stopped 10 feet past him and turned around. The fluorescent lights of the terminal reflected off her glasses, hiding her eyes but highlighting the set of her jaw. "You have a systemic infection in your Chicago hub," Vivienne said, her voice echoing in the quiet corridor. And based on the behavior of your flight crew, it has metastasized to the air. My report goes to the Secretary of Transportation in 1 hour. You have until then to decide if you want to cooperate or if you want me to recommend an immediate suspension of your operating certificate for the Midwest region. One of the lawyers gasped. Suspension? Dr. Clark, that would cripple the airline. It's a death sentence. Vivienne smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Then I suggest you perform surgery immediately. She turned and walked away, her sneakers squeaking rhythmically on the linoleum, leaving the executives standing in the cold, sterile light of their own failure. 48 hours later, the surgery began. Brianna Miller sat in the office of the Chicago O'Hare station manager. The room was glass-walled, allowing the other agents, the ones she had bullied and belittled for years, to watch. Gary, the manager who had once been her ally in pettiness, wouldn't even look her in the eye. He stared at a piece of paper on his desk. "Termination?" Brianna screeched, her face a mask of disbelief. "For what? Enforcing policy? I was protecting the priority lane. I have 22 years, Gary. You can't fire me." "It's not just termination, Brianna," Gary said, his voice flat. He slid a paper across the desk. "It's a 4-cause dismissal. Gross misconduct, falsification of federal records, and harassment of a protected federal officer." "I want my union rep," Brianna demanded, crossing her arms. "The union declined to represent you," Gary replied softly. "They saw the video footage from the gate cameras, the way you snatched her phone, the way you mocked her clothes. They said it's indefensible. They're cutting you loose to save the collective bargaining agreement." Brianna felt the blood drain from her face. No union, no severance, no pension protection. "But where am I supposed to go?" she whispered. "Skyline is my life." "You have 10 minutes to clear out your locker," Gary said, finally looking up. His eyes were cold. "Security will escort you to the curb. And Brianna, your airport badge has already been deactivated. Do not try to re-enter the secure zone." The walk of shame was brutal, as Brianna was marched past the check-in counters by 2 large security guards. She saw Jessica, the young agent she had tried to corrupt. Jessica looked up, met Brianna's eyes, and then deliberately looked away, focusing on a customer. Brianna was a ghost, but the real karma hit 2 weeks later. Brianna applied for a job as a receptionist at a high-end hotel downtown. She nailed the interview. But 3 days later, the rejection email came. "Dear Miss Miller, while your experience is extensive, a flag appeared on your background check regarding a federal transportation incident. Due to our insurance policies, we cannot move forward. Brianna Miller, the gatekeeper who loved to deny people access, was now permanently locked out of the industry she loved. She eventually found work at a call center for a debt collection agency, answering phones in a windowless room where her restroom breaks were timed to the second. If Brianna's fall was quiet and bureaucratic, Tiffany Banks's fall was loud, public, and viral. Because Tiffany had attempted to physically restrain a federal officer and lied to the captain about a safety threat, the charges weren't just internal, they were criminal. She was arraigned in a federal court in Virginia. The video of her being dragged off the plane in handcuffs had been leaked to TMZ. It had 40 million views in 2 days. The hashtag #ByTiffany was trending worldwide. Her defense attorney, a weary public defender, sat her down in a stark interrogation room. "Here is the reality, Ms. Banks," the lawyer said, tossing a file on the metal table. "The Department of Justice wants to make an example of you. They are tired of flight crews weaponizing safety to discriminate against passengers. You are the poster child for everything wrong with modern air travel." "But I didn't know she was an auditor," Tiffany sobbed, her makeup running, her influencer persona shattered. I thought she was just some nobody. And that, the lawyer said, is exactly why they're going to crush you. The plea deal is on the table. You plead guilty to interference with flight crew members and filing a false report. What's the sentence? Tiffany trembled. 18 months of probation, 500 hours of community service, a $10,000 fine. The lawyer paused. And a permanent addition to the federal no-fly list. Tiffany gasped. No-fly? But I want to be a travel vlogger. My Instagram is all about travel. Not anymore, the lawyer said. You won't be setting foot on an airplane for the rest of your life. You can take the bus. Tiffany took the deal. Her social media following evaporated overnight. Brands dropped her. She was toxic. 6 months later, a TikTok user posted a video from a drive-through window in suburban Maryland. The camera focused on a woman in a visor and a grease-stained polo shirt handing over a bag of burgers. She looked exhausted, aged, and broken. User, a travel king. Caption, you'll remember the racist flight attendant from the viral video. Just got my nuggets from her. Life comes at you fast. Skyline Justice. The video got 12 million likes. Tiffany Banks had wanted to be famous. She got her wish. The Skyline Airways boardroom was usually a place of quiet confidence and expensive scotch. Today, it was a slaughterhouse. The Clark decree, the remediation plan Vivian had slapped onto Pendleton's chest, was brutal. It required Skyline to pay a $12 million civil rights fine. It mandated that an independent monitor, selected by Dr. Clark's office, be embedded in the HR department for 3 years. But the board of directors wanted blood. The stock is down 14%, the chairman of the board shouted, slamming his fist on the mahogany table. Our brand trust score is in the toilet, and it's all because of one flight out of Chicago. It's because of the culture, Arthur Pendleton tried to argue. A culture you oversaw, Arthur, the chairman snapped. The board has voted. We are accepting your resignation, effective immediately. You will not receive your golden parachute. We are framing this as a retirement for health reasons, but everyone will know. Arthur Pendleton, who had dismissed Vivienne's warnings for years, walked out of the building with a cardboard box. His career ended by the woman in the hoodie. 3 months later, the transformation was underway. Skyline had implemented mandatory, rigorous bias training for every employee, from baggage handlers to pilots. The culminating event was a company-wide seminar at the convention center in Atlanta. Thousands of employees sat in the dark auditorium. The screen on stage illuminated with a single image, a pair of gray sweatpants and a hoodie. A murmur went through the crowd. Dr. Vivian Clark walked onto the stage. She moved with the grace of a predator who has already eaten and is now just observing the jungle. She wore a sharp, crimson power suit that commanded absolute attention. She gripped the podium. "Good morning," she said. The silence was absolute. "You are looking at this image behind me," she gestured to the hoodie on the screen, "and you are seeing clothes. But 3 months ago, 2 of your former colleagues saw a threat. They saw someone who didn't belong. And because of what they saw, they lost everything." She leaned in closer to the microphone. "My office conducted 400 audits this year. Most of the time, I wear a suit. I get treated with respect. I get the champagne. I get the smile. But the day I put on that hoodie, I became invisible to your humanity and hyper-visible to your prejudice." She paused, letting the weight of the words settle on the audience. "I am here to tell you that the era of the gatekeeper is over. You are not here to judge who is worthy of a seat. You are here to serve. And if you cannot tell the difference between a thug and a federal auditor, because you are blinded by your own bias, then you do not belong in the sky. She looked out at the faces, some ashamed, some attentive, some scared. "And remember this," Vivienne added, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I have a very large team, and we love comfortable clothes. So the next time you see someone in row 34 wearing sweatpants and looking tired, be kind. They might just be signing your paycheck." 1 year later, Vivienne sat in her office at the Department of Transportation, reviewing the latest compliance numbers. Skyline Airways had jumped from the bottom of the list to the top. Customer complaints were down 60%. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from her nephew, Matthew, a 22-year-old law student with dreadlocks and a penchant for vintage basketball jerseys. Matthew: "Auntie Viv, you won't believe it. I'm at O'Hare flying out to see Mom. I'm rocking my Lakers jersey and the ripped jeans." Vivienne felt a spike of protective anxiety. "Vivienne, is everything okay? Did they hassle you?" 3 dots appeared. Then a photo loaded. It was a selfie of Matthew. He was sitting in seat 1A of a Skyline jet. He was holding a glass of sparkling water. Behind him, a flight attendant, a young woman with a genuine smile, was giving a thumbs up to the camera. "Matthew, the gate agent saw my ticket, looked me in the eye and said, 'Welcome back, Mr. Clark. Thank you for your loyalty.' Treated me like a king. Whatever you did, it worked." Vivienne stared at the photo. A tear traced a path down her cheek. She wiped it away, smiled, and typed back. "Vivienne, enjoy the flight, baby. You earned it." She placed the phone down, closed the file labeled Skyline, closed, and swiveled her chair to look out the window at the Washington Monument. The audit was over. But the standard had been set. And that is how the Queen of Petty turned into the Queen of Justice. Dr. Vivienne Clark didn't just win a seat. She changed an entire industry. It's a powerful reminder that prejudice isn't just morally wrong. It's an expensive business mistake. You never know who you're talking to, and you never know when the person you're judging holds the power to end your career. What would you have done if you were in Vivienne's shoes? Would you have revealed your badge earlier? Or would you have let them dig their own grave just like she did? I want to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Especially if you've ever dealt with a Brianna or a Tiffany in real life. If you enjoyed this story of karma being served ice cold, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a story. We have a new saga coming next week about a landlord who tried to evict a tenant, only to find out the tenant owned the bank holding his mortgage. You don't want to miss that. Thanks for watching, and stay safe out there.